Hello everybody, what's going on? Welcome to How I Made, and this is the series where I show you how I made a particular track. So today we're going to be working on, in terms of showing you all the good stuff with my track Dark Aura. Basically this is a dubstep track, very short on both ends of the side of the spectrum of both listening and producing. And this is kind of a fun track for me, so go ahead and get started with everything. So today I'm going to be talking about my arrangement, elements, and goals, and basically also too the sound design and the mixing and mastering, at least in terms of tips that are relevant to this particular bit of production right here, I guess you could say. Just trying to adjust my mic real quick because I noticed it was probably distorting for you guys a little bit, but anyway, let's go ahead and get started. In terms of everything I wanted to cover with this track, like I said, arrangement, elements, and goals is going to be the first thing. I'm going to be covering every single one of these bits, but in terms of the goal itself, really it was just kind of a simple goal. Most of my tracks don't have a deep meaning behind them. They just basically are there for fun, and essentially this is no different. I just wanted to make a really good dubstep track that I kind of felt I was in the mood for, and I think it originally started out as being more of a just a fun bro step type of thing with some sound design experiments I did with some basses. I think it was this one right here. Oops. I wanted to create a bass riff essentially with that one and make it kind of a fun track. So that's pretty much that when it comes to the goal. It really wasn't anything special, but one thing I will note, like I said before, is that this came out really freaking fast. It is the fastest track I have ever made in my entire life, and I mean that literally. Like, this is usually what I do when it comes to these videos. I save a separate file for myself, and so I usually end up playing around and messing around with it a bit. And so this isn't exactly the accurate amount of time, but it's pretty darn close. And 3 hours and 6 minutes. Yes, it was really unusually fast. When I last checked this before I started this video, it was like 2 hours and 58 minutes, so it's probably sub 3 hours. And I'm just like, whoa, but that has a lot to do with workflow and whatnot, which I probably will talk about later in this video. So, yeah, it's pretty much the goals and whatnot. Let's cover the elements. The elements are pretty simple, and there's not a whole lot to them. You have really more like around 7 or 8 elements total, nothing too fancy. So, you got this little, I like to call it the dead mouse pluck. It just plays this really simple melody. In fact, I don't think there's anything more than, there's no more than like 3 patterns of this thing. They just plays the same melody over and over again, except when it goes into the part 2 of both drop 1 and 2. So when it goes to the second part of the first and second drop, it plays this melody right here. Which is really just a long variation of the main melody. Nothing too fancy at all, and really at the end of the day, it's one of those tracks that you don't have to be overcomplicated with stuff. It's really just at the end of the day, make a good melody, make it somewhat catchy, and then there you go. So next thing we have in terms of elements is that we have the strings right here. We have these strings. Pretty cool stuff, I would say. And it's this stuff right here, I think. Actually, no, it is, I think it's this element right here. Just a simple chord progression that kind of builds up over time. I add more layers and layers as the song goes on. So right now it's just playing mostly intervals. Intervals, if you don't know the music theory terminology, is basically only two notes within a given sound, like two notes basically played at the same time. So you can think about it like this. Essentially, a single note is just one note. An interval is two. A chord is three or more. So just in case you don't know. But it kind of does build up over time, and it goes into these awesome things right here. Full-fledged chord progression. It goes into seventh chords and whatnot, and then it just builds up one more time for like a massive chord stack. Which I think what I do is I just basically copy and paste it and kind of stack it like one octave higher, then another octave higher on top of that. Yeah, it's just meant to be that massive, huge chord stack at the end to kind of give it that final hoorah, I guess you could say, of a track. So, fun stuff. Yeah. So, and then after that we have this piano, which is basically there for atmosphere and add another layer. Really, at the end of the day, is copying the chord progression, but in just single notes until the very last drop part here. Then I believe it's just copying these chords right here for the actual strings. And similarly, I think we also have, what is this? What is this? This is I think this is the actual default FL Studio string from the Legacy pack. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is FLS strings or FL Studio strings. That's what these are right here. They're just copying the main pluck elements. There's a lot of copying in this track, so not a whole lot of original variation on this, and really doesn't need to be because it's a very short track. So, then of course we have the basses, which are a lot of fun. You get that main bass. This is what I call the ruler metal, although this is basically a preset specifically made for this track, so I haven't actually saved it yet. And I should probably just go ahead and do that right now. So I can actually use this for future tracks as well. Call it Ruler of Metal. Oh, I think I got one. Just misspelled that. Yeah, so basically this is, I'll go into the sound design for this a little bit later, but essentially you can think about this as a granulizer or sampled sound that I'm able to manipulate in ways to make it rhythmic and actually flow well. So, and have a bass riff essentially. So. So yeah, that's pretty much, it's fun stuff right there. And then, of course, we have the drums, which I'm not really going to go super huge in depth into at this moment, but I will go into a little bit into mixing and mastering because that's most important there. So yeah, basically that. And one of the cool things about this track, before I move on to the arrangement in terms of the track structure, is basically that this track is mostly playing in thirds. It's what I mean by thirds is that pretty much you have regular notes and then you have like triplets. This track is mostly doing triplets with the exception of the pluck, and I think actually the pluck is doing triplets too. Yeah, the pluck is doing some triplets. In fact, a lot of triplets actually. Mostly utilizing triplets, but it's still within a 4 to the floor, not 4 to the floor. What is it? 4/4, whatever thing. You know, basically you can count in fours and you'll still get it, just like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So yeah, it's basically just a weird song as a whole. Let's get into the actual track arrangement because I think this is pretty much covering everything, like literally everything. So there you go. Now this track is basically 16 bars of nothing but just 16 bars. Like it's 16 bars of intro. Like you can look at right here. There's first 4, second 4, third 4, 4, 4. And then that's 16 bars right there. Then it goes into the next 16 bars of the drop A into drop 1A, and then goes into the first drop of B. You can kind of think about the drops separated into 32 bars, but they're really more like typically what dubstep tracks will do, and a lot of other tracks of different genres is that they'll basically take especially if they're like one half and then the second half, they'll basically take the first drop and separate out that into 2 separate parts, and basically that'll be part A and then part B. This is right here is part B. Part B. Yeah, I don't know what the heck that was. Voice cracks suck, yo. And then it goes to another 16 bars of breakdown. And this is something that one of my friends coined as the false start within a lot of dubstep and rhythm. Is that basically what happens is that it'll kind of start, but then it won't really feel like it actually starts, and kind of it's like a delayed start, I guess you could say. Basically taking, I think this is the first, what is this? The first 2 bars of this, and then basically just kind of using that as a sort of delayed start to kind of throw off the track a bit. When I first heard dubstep artists do this, I think the very first time I heard it, an artist do that is actually within Skrillex's First of the Year, although don't quote me on that. It could have been other tracks too. But essentially, just delaying the actual start of the song by just creating this long note, and then once that's done, basically kind of then get it moving, but then keep it at the regular paces as if nothing ever happened. So, kind of throws it off and makes it kind of an interesting design choice, and I decided to do that for here. But then you have, like I said, this is just basically 16 bars here. Then you got this drop 2 part B, which basically does that, and you get a solid outro. 16 bars. Kind of just goes back down as how it started with the low pass filter. So, fun stuff. Now let's go into the sound design. Now the sound design for this track, not that hard, not that complicated, although there is a pretty fun technique that is utilized in the relevant parts of this track. So essentially when it comes to this song, is that there are a couple of neat tricks within Harmor that I've discovered that make it so easy to resample and basically create your own bass riffs. So what I decided to do, I found this out a long time ago with granulization and trying to figure out a way to like make granularized sounds workable within a melodic way, or at the very least a harmonic way, is that what you do is that you take your sound, it can really be any sound you want to, but granularization will go with that. Basically, you put it in Harmor, you turn the scale knob to 0%, and then you can have a lot more fun with it because now it's an actually usable harmonic sound. And I know this because if you take the note of, if you do this technique with the scale knob, and then you basically try to resample it within Serum as the correct key within Serum, it will basically replay it as if it was just normal. So, and that's basically how you can tell that the sound works. And so scale, from what the scale knob, from what I can tell, like the yellow scale knob, what it seems to do is at least flatten it out to a particular note. This makes it workable for actual sound design usage. So let me show you the original sound when it comes to this particular track for the main bass. This is what this is. I don't remember where I sampled this from, and granularized this from, but this is what it sounds like without the low pass filter. It's a lot of fun stuff. So I actually slowed it down from the original sound, but essentially you do what I described, and there you go. Now, one of the other things you want to do when it comes to this is that you want to go into the time offset knob, go to keyboard mapping, and map it up like this. So something like this, at least. You can basically just do this if you wanted to, but you know, I decided to choose this particular envelope shape type of thing. And then after that, you want to go into pitch and make it a static pitch by basically creating this shape. And then there you go. So yeah. And I basically did that for a whole bunch of sounds. And they created their own interesting textures and things like that. And there are some more interesting stuff here too. This is basically a growl sound. I think I imported. Yep, this is another granularized sound. Basically just meant to be a growl bass. And I am utilizing some Serum FX basically with I think this is a foam filter, I think. As it loads. No, flanger, it's a flanger. Just playing at the root note of G. So I think it's 49 Hertz. Or not the root note, but basically a step above the root note, which is 49 Hertz. And yeah. Same kind of setup here. Well, I think this is I don't think that I've actually utilized this particular sound. I could be wrong though. Let me check. Let's see. Doesn't seem like I ever do. So basically, I have a useless plugin. Not a plugin, but not a useless plugin, but something I don't ever use, which is this sound called a high transformer. It's basically the same kind of concept that I described earlier. Just a different sound, really, at the end of the day. So, it's fun stuff. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else about this particular setup that's different or unique or whatever? Any more other sounds? Really, at the end of the day, the only other sound I think that I need to cover is when it comes to sound design, at least, because everything else is basically just plugins that you can just drag and drop and be done with. But really, this dead mouse pluck thing, really the only other thing about it that I need to talk about. Like I said, well, basically, pretty simple stuff. What you do, open up a default, just initialize the preset, so it's the default preset. Put on 5 Hertz unison, make it so that the detune is incredibly small. Same with the blend, bass is smallest. And then after that, you want to go open up a MG24 filter, low pass filter. It's one of the first ones that you go through. Just scroll through it, you'll find it. And then after that, put no resonance, put a little drive, put all the way to the fat, and then leave everything else the same. Make sure you have on in the envelope knob the cutoff, so it kind of goes down like that, like that. Just kind of cuts down, cuts down, yeah. So create that little pluck sound, and then after that, basically go into distortion. And I have this with Bit Crusher, just in case I want to use the Bit Crusher. Just macroed it to this. And then after that, you want to go into another macro, which will basically control the cutoff. And a little bit of the length, or the decay of the envelope, so it kind of decays slower. I just left it at this particular setting right here, so I didn't really mess around with it too much, but yeah. And that's pretty much it. So, fun stuff. And I think that's all for sound design. I mean, like, pretty much if you really want to create these kind of sounds that I made, I can't really make it so that you can precisely create them, but essentially granularize the sound, go in within Harbor, put the scale knob to 0%, and mess around with the image time offset and the keyword mapping for pitch to make it a static pitch. And then create your own bass riffs just like that. It's pretty simple. Not a whole lot to it, not a whole lot of complication there. And at the end of the day, you can create a lot of nutty sounds just by resampling and granularizing sounds. It's pretty freaking amazing, if I'm honest. So, something I'm going to be doing a lot more and a lot of other tracks you have yet to see. So, anyway, let's move on to the final part, which is mixing and mastering. Okay, so when it comes to mixing and mastering, one of the things that people really honestly, I think, fail to understand is that as a whole, mixing and mastering is not a one learned skill. It's a lot of small things you combine together to essentially make into a solid mix. There's a lot of small tips I can give you, but at the end of the day, one of the things you got to realize is that mixing and mastering is also an experimental and experience-based thing. So one of the things I'll recommend you do is that you listen to a lot of tracks that you think are really good at mixing and note things that you may have not noticed. Like, for a good example for me, as I always like to quote this particular track from Mr. Bill, which I can't pronounce the name of it, but he came out with it a long time ago. It's like a glitch hop thing. And one of the things I noticed is that in that particular track, there's like no reverb in that. It's dry as the desert. And for me, I was like, that clued me in on something. Maybe I shouldn't use reverb in my tracks, at least not as much. And I did that with one of the tracks. I think it was Running from Dystopia. And I just noticed, like, instantly, like, was a lot better. My mix downs were just sounding a lot better. And so making your tracks incredibly dry to the point where there's hardly, if any, reverb at all is a good tip right there. Because basically what happens when you use reverb is that you're blurring the sound across a particular scale of time, whether it's like a couple seconds, a couple 100 milliseconds or whatever. You're blurring the sound, and that basically creates less space for you to kind of operate in. And then the general rule of thumb when it comes to making mix downs work is that less is more. And so when you have more stuff being blurred within everything else, it kind of makes it harder to mix that around and actually make it sound decent. So actually, it's another tip for you right there too. If you want to have a better mix down and you want to have it also be louder too, don't have as many instruments in your songs. Trust me, it helps out a lot. I think there was this track called Foreign Life where I tried to stuff as many tracks and many instruments as I can in that freaking song, and it took me over like 40 different takes just to like 40 different demos of rendered out trial and error just to try and make that track work. I mean, of course, I wasn't not as good as mixed down as I am now, but if given the choice, I probably would not stuff as many instruments as I did in that particular song. So, but my whole overall point is basically saying this: you gotta experience some things. You gotta basically experiment with some things and learn and realize that mixing as a whole is a skill that requires many small things that combine together into one whole package to essentially make it so that it sounds freaking awesome. And if your mix sounds awesome, your master is going to sound awesome. Now, one of the things that you might want to do when you do have a good, decent mix is that you want to figure out, okay, how can I make it louder? And there's two things you can do to really make it kind of at least feel louder and also be louder. One of the things is that you can increase or decrease your headroom depending on whatever you want to do. And if you're like me, where you basically do your self masters and whatnot, and you don't have a mastering engineer do it, which most people I would encourage you to do, especially if you don't have a whole lot of money, is that basically what you want to do is that you want to basically just take the pregain up. If you're one of those people that master on the go and your mastering is in the same project, even if you master in a separate project, best thing to do is utilize 32-bit wave files, which basically means that you don't have to worry about distortion and clipping, essentially, like the bad kind of clipping, not soft saturation. And then basically just pump the pregain up. Just pump the pregain up on the master, and you essentially have a louder mix. So I'll demonstrate this with the first drop. So yeah, that was essentially the waveform of this particular track. I'll play it again and just pause it. So yeah, now the green right here is basically just the actual like final waveform of the song. That's all it is. And if you take a look at the pregain, it's stupid loud. It's like peaking so high. And that's because with this one, I have it peaking, I think, above 2 dB. So it's not terribly high, but at the same time, though, it's high enough for it to matter. Listen to it when it's not 2 dB or 2 decibels higher than 0. Not a huge difference, but it's noticeable, and I could even make it louder. Or quieter. That's one of the things that people often forget about when it comes to mixing and mastering and making your stuff louder, is that you can basically just turn the pregain up, especially if you are mastering it yourself. Now, if you are not mastering it yourself, basically just follow whatever your mastering engineer says. But pretty much I would say that if you're mastering yourself and you want to make it louder, just turning up the pregain is a pretty simple option. Especially if you're making the kind of music that I'm making right here, which is heavy bro step type stuff. Now, chill step and whatnot may be a little bit different story, but even then, there's some chill stuff that's actually pretty heavy out there too, and utilizes a lot of the same techniques that bro step producers use. It's just a matter of how far do they push it up to make it heavy, essentially. So, and one of the things I wanted to mention, the second tip real quick before I kind of duck on out of here with this video, is pretty much soft saturation. Soft saturation is a very useful tool to make your stuff basically clip but have controlled clipping. So what I mean by controlled clipping? So essentially what controlled clipping is in terms of soft saturation, what soft saturation is that it's essentially a soft limit in terms of distortion and whatnot. You can kind of think about it as you have regular distortion when clipping, and then you have a controlled version of it that pretty much can reproduce on all speakers consistently to the point where they all sound alike. Because one of the major downsides of using just regular distortion to clip, like if I just wanted to let this clip right here, with no soft saturation whatsoever, one of the downsides is that because of the way the technology works, because when you're distorting stuff and it's clipping, it's basically hitting that threshold where the speaker's trying to move in and out really fast, you know, like just kind of pumping up and down like that. It's trying to do it as fast as it freaking can, but it's not going to get it perfect because basically you have the way it works is it just have a solid cut of audio. It can't like go from position A to position B like instantly. There's some time that travels between it, and because of that, it's gonna slightly change the sound of it from speaker to speaker, and it may sound bad. It may not be what it may sound good on your system essentially, but because of the way that physical mediums of sound reproduction work, may not sound very good on other people's systems. So a good way to solve that is basically control the clipping and distortion with soft saturation. So anything that goes over 0 dB for this essentially will be soft clipped in basically distorting, but it will be distorting in a way that's actually not gonna sound bad on some system or another, like headphone speakers or well, not headphone speakers, that makes no sense, or basically iPod earbuds, pretty much. So it's kind of an interesting thing. One of the videos I recommend you watch on this is actually Steve Lassar's mixing and mastering video, which came out a couple of years ago, but it's still relevant to basically what I'm talking about right here. Because if you want to know how he does it and how I do it, basically just watch this video. So I'll put a link in the description for that as well too. So, and one other thing I guess I can mention as well is this time variables thing that I found out from Austin or AU5. So it basically, if you want to essentially have a perfect time variable setting so that it basically will the time variables will go down as low as it possibly can to the point where it'll almost distort but not quite. Is that what you want to do? Find out the key of your song. So the key of the song is C, and we have the lowest hertz value, which is 32.7, and then you basically go into your calculator, go into 1,000, divide that by 32.7, round it up or down depending on the numbers you have. So basically it's going to be rounded down to, well, rounded to nothing, to not even rounded at all really, just the 30.58 hertz. So 30.58, and I'll use that as my time variable for basically the low end, and whatever other notes, whatever other hertz value you have for your other stuff. Basically just keep it just like so. For example, kind of confusing, I guess, but essentially the low end for this, I'm basically kind of I'm putting the time variables at 30 hertz. What am I trying to say? 30 milliseconds, 30.58 milliseconds for the attack, release, and sustain. And that's for the low end. For the mid section, I basically did the same technique that I was describing to you with the calculator and putting that with 170 hertz. That's what I thought sounded pretty good. So basically 1,000 divided by 170, and I came up with 5.88, and that's what I did here. 5.88. Did a little bit higher than that, but you know, just to ensure that it doesn't distort. And did the same technique with the high multi-band knob on this particular thing. So there you go. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I might just make a separate tutorial on that just to make it kind of simple, but essentially that's what I did. So that's one technique you can use, and that's pretty much all I'm going to be covering. So Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it was at least somewhat educational and somewhat useful. Maybe not, maybe it was, who knows. But if it was, be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next tutorial type video and maybe the next song for the future. See y'all later.